Okay, hello everyone. I am Ahmed Helmi, founder of xpdays, and today we are hosting this webinar with Agile Arena, represented by its founder Mona Redwan. To tell you first about this initiative, we started the series on August 2020, and today is our 26th webinar. About xpdays, it's an initiative for gathering people interested in Agile, extreme programming, Scrum, coding, and we have started our activities on November 2020. At November 2019, sorry. And for xpdays, for Agile Arena, it's a consultation and training provider company. They provide their services on Egypt and the Middle East. And to follow us on our website, xpdays.org and agilearena.net. And today I would like to welcome Aneta, our guest. And I know Aneta for about 4 months now, I think.
Yeah.
And Aneta is one of the best Scrum Masters I have ever met. Aneta, the floor is yours. Please start.
Okay, so thank you very much, and many thanks for inviting me to this event, and I will try my best to share with you some tips and tricks and to touch the background about the user stories, which is to be our lead topic. Before we kick it off, a few words about myself. My name is Aneta Adamczyk. I am originally from Poland, living in Slovakia for past, 15 years already, working as a Scrum Master for AT&T. The very first time I heard about Agile and the Scrum was around 10 or a bit more years ago. And from that moment on, I realized that this is something which is very close to my skin, and I started to dig in and, to learn and practice more and more. And here I am today, trying to share what I know or what I learned from my studies and from my practice. So today we'll be touching the topic of the user stories. I am using the word touching for the purpose because I'm fully aware that this is such a broad topic that we cannot cover it within 1, 2, or 3 hours even. However, I do believe that this background information we will be talking about during today's event will give you some insight in the overview, and maybe they will lead you to the further discussions and exploration on your own and within your teams. So the agenda is very short, a bit of intro about the user story, why stories, the template, and at the end, I hope if the time allows, we can cover a few bad examples, like what not to do. So let's kick it off. What is the user story and where does it come from? So the user story basically is an informal explanation or description of the software or feature from the customer standpoint. So from the perspective of the person or of the people who will be using it in a real life. So a bit of history. The very first time the user story as a term was mentioned is like back in 1999, and it is in the extreme programming, when the planning game is covered, and in this part the user story as a term was firstly met. The fun fact, the Scrum guide itself does not mention user story anywhere. And like for those of you who know the methodology or the framework, who used to work in a Scrum environment, you might think like, oh, user story means Scrum. Not necessarily, because in the Scrum guide you can only see the backlog item. No one, never in any previous versions from this very first original version of the Scrum Guide, there is no single user story mentioned at all. So the user story is meant to describe the feature or is meant to describe the behavior. It's meant to describe the need and the customer's desire. And the user story does not cover the technical aspect of the implementation itself. However broadly we think the technical aspect. So talking about the user story, we are talking mainly about the customer need or the customer desire. So we may treat the user story as a mini or easier like use case. In the presentation, you see the software because we, like most of us, come from the software business. However, if any of you does not come or does not work in a software, just replace it with the product, because nowadays it can be any product, not necessarily needs to be software. On the bottom, at the bottom of this slide, you can see that this should be the unit of work that the team commits in an iteration. I put it on purpose for those who are practicing, because this is just a hint. This is best practice. So this is something many people tried, and based on their experience, they came to this. However, this is not the set in stone rule. Why it's worth to do this like this, we will be discussing a bit later in the course of the presentation. So the user stories are used or were meant to be created to address very important problem, issue, or challenge. Depends on the situation we are in. It's communication. How to communicate between those who need the software or with those who need the product, with those who create the product. So those who create the product need to communicate with those who need it, because I don't know whether you realize, but like past 15 years or maybe longer, we do not have the luxury Microsoft and IBM had in the beginning. Like they built the Windows, put it in the Word and said like, on your knees, here is the Windows, go and use it. And everyone was delighted. Now the situation is quite opposite. We need to listen and we need to talk to the customers so that what we build makes sense and bring value to them, and not vice versa. And it's not because it's a bad karma or something. It's because we live in a very complex environment, in a very complex and fast changing times. It is what it is. We cannot change it. We have to deal with this. And that's the way of dealing with the changing and complex situation. So while talking about the communication, so we have customers and we have those who work on the product, on the software, on the service, name it, based on the business you are working with. We need not forget about the balance. And it's like in each and every conversation, the conversation is vivid and makes sense and bring the value when we have two sides talking and benefiting from that. Meaning we have the balance. We speak, then we listen, then we listen, then we speak, and then the other side listens. So because, and here it is all the same, like I'm not revealing you any extraordinary truth. This is all you know from the practice already. So talking about the user story, having this conversation with our customers, we should keep the balance as well. Because if the balance is more like on a business side, if the business side dominates, then they talk about the functionality, they needs, they desires, but they do not have this so-called technical background needed. And sometimes what they need make perfect sense, but maybe the order should be adjusted because of the technical limitations or the abilities. On the other hand, if we have the developers or doers or anyone who is working on a product, if this so-called development or technical side dominates, then we end up in having technical jargon we are all used to, we all know by heart, and you know, all these mental shortcuts and all these discussions, this is our world, we get it. And it's so easy to forget the others, not so much. So it's all about the balance, talking, listening, and about finding the common language so that we not just, you know, talk and listen, but we really understand the other side. So we have the conversation which ends up in the mutual agreement and with the mutual understanding. So what do we do? And this is the slide you might maybe laugh about, but this is about the agile approach we should all take. So we should make decisions on the based on the information we have at this very moment, which means that every day we are getting, like while working on something, every day we are getting new and new information, and every day we are working with those informations, and every day we have to make the decision, meaning that we do not have this huge conversation with our client when they speak about their desires or their needs or their problems, the challenges they face. Then we listen and then we do what we believe we understood or what we believe they said us. Because, you know, I say something, you listen and you understand me through your perception, through your experience, in your way. And you understand me correctly. While I'm talking, my intentions might be different from your understanding. You know, tricky part is like both you and I are right. But at the same time, both you and I are wrong, because we cannot connect on a communication level. So user stories are meant to have this ongoing conversation with the customer based on the information we receive every day throughout the project or throughout the year, like century, name it, for your convenience. So why user stories? As mentioned, the user story describes the desire or the requirement, the value or the benefit to the stakeholder, to the customer. So by having this or by using this format, we only start the conversation with the customer, because user story is very short in the description and it does not cover many details. And this is meant to be on purpose, because the user story, this card or this short description, is only to be the trigger for further conversation, either with your customer, your stakeholders, or within your team, how to do some things. And the user story is meant to answer 3 questions, but a very important one. Very first, like, who are you building this for, or who are we building this for? So who is going to be the end user or the customer? Who's going to use it? Then what are we building? And the last one, in my humble opinion, the most important one, why are we building this? Meaning, what value this will give to our customer or to our stakeholder. And maybe some of you saw this already. This is the most famous post-it as a who, I want what, so that why. So we see who, what, and why. And this is the very short one sentence format. If in the course of your conversation you realize, oh no, this is so complex, we cannot make it one sentence, then stop and think why you cannot make it so. Maybe it's 2 sentences, maybe it's 2 stories, and maybe it's 10, or maybe the issue is elsewhere, and you will learn it by practicing. So the perfect user story is the, let me recap, is the requirement or is the desire of our customer from the customer standpoint, and it's very short on the descriptive side. The not a perfect user story, but the good user story should follow the INVEST acronym. To those of you who never heard about it, so the good user story should be in a very first place independent, meaning this should be short piece of software or of the product, of the service, which is independent, like a Lego. So one tiny piece, but independent one, not bounded, not glued to 10 another. In a perfect world scenario, of course. Then it should be negotiable, meaning that the user story is the starting point for the discussion and not the contract, not something like set in stone, like, oh, 3 months ago or 3 years ago, even better, during our kickoff meeting, you said this, and now it stays with us forever. No, it's just the start. Then user story should be valuable, meaning that it should bring the value to our customers. And estimable, meaning that we should be able, while talking about this small, standalone, independent piece, it should be that size we are able to roughly estimate, not to commit to hours or minutes or seconds, but we are able to estimate the complexity of this standalone piece. Small, like estimable one side, but it should be also small enough so that we can think of it in terms of the planning. If the user story, we can estimate it, but on the other hand, this is so big that we cannot think like, oh my God, how to plan it, how to figure it out even. This means that maybe this feature or this requirement, this desire is too complex, too vague, or too big, and maybe it should get back to the discussion table with the customers or to the round table within your team to reconsider how to make it smaller. Maybe we should split it, or maybe we should rethink it, or something else. And the last but not least, the story should be testable, meaning if we have a feature which cannot be tested, how can we say it's doing what it's meant to be doing and it's doing it fine? So in a perfect world, each and every user story should be taken through this circle just to do this. I used to call it the health check or the quality check of our user stories. If any of those parameters are not met, maybe it's worth to sit as a team and discuss why is it so. And this could lead you to very interesting discoveries. I ran those table sessions a couple of times, and we like always came to conclusions none of us even thought in the beginning of the meeting. So getting back to the user story, the user story is like is to be seen or perceived by 3S. To those of you who never saw this acronym, as the cards, the conversation, and the confirmation. So talking about the card, I'm going to show you like very simple template for the user story. The card is that because the good user story, and this is the best practice, the good user story is the story which can be described on the single post-it. And we all know that the post-it is not that big in size. So we have this sentence as a who, I want what, so that why. At the bottom, you see the priority, your size, and the back card is for the acceptance criteria. But the most important thing is like there is no specific format. There are best practices and good advices. If the user story is on an A4, like font 10, this is not the user story. It's the elaborate, or this is the business case, or maybe some technical documentation. It has to be short. It has to be to the point. It has to ask those questions: for whom, what, and most importantly, why we are working on something. Like, how does it work, whether you're gonna use the square or other format, like the post-it or the electronic way, doesn't matter. Like, post-its doesn't work like in this Corona online digital times anymore. But the most important thing is to have this concept in mind. And this is also, I wish to mention here, this format for whom we are building, what we are building, and why we are building. This is also a very powerful tool while talking to our stakeholders or clients, because we imagine we enter the meeting room and our client is gonna tell us like 99.9%, I want it all. And everything is equally important to me. Every single piece has the highest / critical priority. If you don't deliver, or if you don't build everything, I won't be satisfied. This will not work for me. So you need to do it all, and you need to do it all at once, because everything is equally important. And you know what? The customer is right, because that's the way they think, that's the way they feel. And we just say, like in my teams, we say like, okay, we take it, you are right. We can do everything, mostly probably, including it, like considering the technical limitation, but let's have a look where to start. And that's the very first time we bring the user story format and we talk to our customer using this. And this simple sentence leads us very often to very serious or very funny discussions, because let's imagine you are sitting in front of the manager and he says like, I want the report and this is critical and I want this report to be that complex. And we say, okay, we do the report for you. Who is going to use the report? And they say like, management, mostly probably. And we say like, okay, and being more specific, who from management is using this report? And they say like, Miss XYZ. And Miss XYZ is sitting at the same table, and she said like, oh, you know, frankly speaking, I don't look at it like past year already. And then we see, okay, we believe you still need a report, but maybe this is not that important. Maybe we can consider this later. Or they say like, I want the new service have this and that functionality. And we say, okay, and what's the value behind? Like, what does it bring you? How can you benefit from having this functionality we will be working on for X amount of days? and they say, you know what? I don't know. When I was coming to this meeting, I thought that this is so critical, but while having this conversation structured this way, I'm not that sure anymore. I will take it back to my team and I will discuss with them once more whether we need really this or we need something else, which could be more important and which potentially could bring us more value than this thing we thought. So this is very powerful tool to run the conversation with the customer so that we understand them better and they understand their needs better, and they understand like how to improve or how to make things differently from these old paths and ways we are all used to working. So the conversation, this is exactly what I meant here. Like, we start the conversation, we share the ideas, but the conversation not only with the customer or stakeholder or end user, but also we start the conversation within the team. So we, for example, have the user story, we have the requirement from the customer, and then we sit as a team and discuss how to make it, like how to make it better, whether we have something at hand or maybe not, or maybe the requirement from the customer is not clear to us. Maybe we should ask someone else. Maybe someone else did it before and we can only benefit from that. So this is like two levels or two rounds of the conversation. One, talking to our customer, and the second, talking to our peers or talking to our colleagues. Also, like, maybe this is something which I never done before, but Ahmed sitting just next to me, like, did it 5 times already, and he will say, like, you know what, I did it 5 times, I can make it like this. So the conversation and the confirmation, what you saw at the bottom or reverse side of the user story, is the acceptance criteria. So how can we know that the user story was delivered, and how can we know that the user story was delivered well, the way it was meant to be delivered? And the acceptance criteria we should formulate not while developing or while working on the user story, but the acceptance criteria is yet another round of the conversation between us as a team and the customer, so that upfront we know what we both expect to see at the end. So what is expected end result? And this is like very useful tool because it calms the situation down a lot with the customers. Because before we even touch the story, before we even start working on it, they already know what we're gonna work on and what is expected to be as an outcome from this work, and what are the acceptance criteria they will be checking this piece of work we will be delivering against. And this is also very useful to us as a team working on this user story, because we know when to stop. So there is no this temptation to gold plating, you know. I bet we all know, like, you know, this meets the acceptance criteria, but I wish to add this and they will for sure like it. And then no one realizes that, and you spend hours on it, and like, you are disappointed and the customer is disappointed as well, because they say, I'm not paying for that, I never wanted it. So we know where to stop our work, they know what to expect, and we, by having this clarity, we avoid the situation that we sit in front of our customer, we present, dear customer, we are loud and proud to present you this and that piece of service, software, product, and we hear like, oh, you know, but I was thinking, or I was imagining that this could be done other way, or I was thinking something else, which means that we need to have clearly define the acceptance criteria, which will specify the conditions under the story is delivered or not delivered. And those acceptance criteria need to be short and straightforward and to the point. So they should be written in the client language every time, because if they are not, client will not understand us and they will have no idea how to check and confirm that the story was delivered correctly. And then we need to naturally keep those criteria like as agnostic as possible, meaning like doesn't matter how tempting it is, we should avoid technical language, technical jargon, or shortcuts. So we need to make sure that the other side understands us the way we want to be understood. And the third one is my favorite one. We should pay attention to details to avoid something which is like to those tiny words like all, any, every, if appropriate, or better. Because I many times saw the user stories, I want this service to run better than last month. And like better, like what? Twice the speed, 20 times the speed? Like what should be better? Or maybe different color or what? Like what's better for me not necessarily is better for you. So be careful to those. And all, like, or every, like those are very tricky words, like everyone can interpret differently. So best advice, try to be as specific as possible and don't try to cover each and every possible or impossible scenario. Focus on the story, focus on the value, focus on this single piece. And the best acceptance criteria are very short, like 3 to 5 straightforward, short bullet points are the best ones. Because the more details we have, the more time we spend, and the more discussions we have, and we can from those discussions pretty often we can fall in the trap of having like off the topic discussion, which is not taking us any closer to the end point of this specific user story. So talking about the writing user stories, in a slide you see I meant the product owner, and this is for this fun part from the very first slide. When we hear Scrum, we know who the product owner is, and then we run with the user stories. So I did it on purpose so that we close the loop with the beginning of the presentation. But of course, it does not need to be the product owner who is working or who is creating or dealing with the user stories. It can be any team member or any of you who decide to give a chance to the user story format as a way of leading the conversation with the customer. However, regardless of the role and what is your position, I put like few bullet points in here so that you can consider while writing or working or choosing the user stories. So those 3 questions: why, for whom, and what. And the 80-20 rule is also very, very useful with the conversation with the customer. Because if you like talking to the customer, and let me bring back the reporting example, and they say like, I need this report, and you say like, okay, this is the complexity, we brainstorm it with the team, and for this complexity, for many data sources, interfaces, and other like technological obstacles or challenges we have, it's gonna take us like 1 month or 3 months. And then the customer hearing that may think like, oh, you know, I thought that this is gonna be 2 or 3 days or maximum 1 week. If this is so complex that you need to spend like 1 month or 2 months on this, let's put it for later because there are more urgent requirements or more urgent features I wish to have first. And then we can come back to this discussion. And this is fair and open. And if you just present it to the customer like this, I personally don't believe any customer will have an issue with your openness and with your honesty. So value is the driver. Yes, then you see the estimates or the skill set, like whom do we need to make it happen or to make it live? The acceptance criteria, short and to the point. And don't forget about the testing, because user story or feature or anything which is not tested is not proven to be live. So the product owner in Scrum or anyone who is working on a product is the person who knows what is needed, or the representative of the customer. So responsible for what do we need, what problem we are trying to solve. And the team, in most cases, is the crew who knows how to make it happen. So if we put those like what and how together, then we end up in a successfully delivered story, meaning the functional piece of something which will bring value to our customer. While working on a stories, I do believe that some of you or all of you saw the iceberg. So we have like the sprint or iteration or the week, next month, our closest future. Then we have the release, something which is a bit ahead of time, and future release like even more ahead of time. So while working on stories, and let me make a loop to the decisions we are taking on an everyday basis, we should focus only on those things which are closest to our future, so on the top of the iceberg, and we should prioritize them this way. So something which is closest, this is something which is most urgent, this is something which is most important to our customers. So those are things we should have a closer look, and we should have the deep discussion, and those are things we should focus on. Anything which is farther and farther away into future will come when the time comes. Meaning like we shall not focus on each and every story, detail, feature from the entire project, product, program, possible or impossible scenarios. Why is that? Because it's waste of time, believe me or not. Like you are thinking about the features you're gonna deliver in the second half of 2022, you will talk about it like for 10 times minimum before the time comes. Why do have 10 times the same discussion? Isn't it not enough to have it once when a time comes? Then we save some time and spend elsewhere, meaning on the top of the iceberg. So we are getting closer to the presentation. I prepared like 5 most common mistakes, maybe not most common mistakes, maybe 5 mistakes I pretty often see when the teams are working on a user stories. The mistake number 1, user story for a user. So we see the example. As a user, I want to be able to manage ads so that I can remove expired and erroneous ads. And like from the start, as a user, everyone is a user. Isn't it pretty vague? So maybe it's worth to be specific in here, like who specifically is going to be using that, so that we avoid the confusion. The number 2, the user story for a product owner. I like it, and it's pretty common. As a product owner, I want the system to have the possibility of deleting ads so that users have the possibility of deleting ads. And I'm telling you this because I'm the product owner. So my law, your life, you do this. Like, really? Who is going to use it? Who is going to have the possibility? You are going to be the main user? You want a story? Here you have one. Waste of time. Number 3, the user story for the developer. Pretty common as well. And here I would like to pause for a while because few times I've heard the question, and very valid and legitimate question from the developer. But you know, there are some technical things we need to do this way or another, but we have to do them. Otherwise, the whole system or the whole service we are building will not work. And this is absolutely valid, and this is absolutely right. And if the customer, for any reason, is not aware that those are activities or those are tasks you need to perform at a certain point of time, and this is going you to take X amount of time, in most of the cases, it's just enough to say it transparently in front of the customer, and that's it, done deal. But we don't need to create the user story for that to justify our work we need to do for the sake of the quality of the product we are working on. So the fact that there is no value for the customer, this only proves that the user story was not meant to be created in a form of the user story, but it does not mean that the work shall not be done because it cannot be described in a form of the user story. Number 4, no business value. Yeah, and this is my favorite, personally, my favorite part of the aha moment while having the discussion with the customer. I need this, and I need this badly. I wanna shout this, I wanna push this, until I realize, oh, there is no value for me in here. Like, really, why am I pushing for that? Like this. Where is the value? Nowhere. Tough luck. And the last one, there are no acceptance criteria, which means that how can we know, like both sides, like whether that was delivered the way we wanted it to be delivered? Tricky part. Then we go to the meeting, which is called review, demo, or other name, and we sit in front of each other and we present the result of our tough work, and we hear like, oh, you know, I was thinking that this could look different way. And we like boldly ask like, oh, I see, and which way? And we hear back like, I'm not sure, but differently. Bang, the meeting is dead, everyone is unhappy. Okay, so for the closure, I wish to leave you and with the thought that the user story is the trigger. It's like not the end goal. We are not aiming to have a list of pretty user stories. We wanted to have the product which will bring value to the customer so that we are satisfied with the work we've done, with the time we spent on, and they are satisfied with the outcome and with what we built for them. So the conversation and the mutual understanding on an everyday basis, not like during the hard lockdown 1 week, and then we develop for 2 years and end up in delivering beautiful product no one wants. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last slide on my presentation. Thank you very much. And I pass to Ahmed.
Thank you, Anita, for sharing your insight and experience. And I think, yes, all the story of user stories. It's all about user stories. I would like to thank you everyone for attending with us. And if you want to follow up with us from our website, xpdays.org and agilearena.net. And now I'll just stop the record and start taking your questions. Thank you.
And I will stop sharing if you don't mind.